Welcome to The Backstory, a program from the North Dakota News Cooperative that takes an in-depth look at the stories we're reporting for you. I'm Sabrina Halverson, CEO of the North Dakota News Cooperative, and this week on The Backstory, we continue our conversation with conservation photographer Mike Forsberg and Andrew Caven of the International Crane Foundation, following their completed 2,500-mile bicycle ride along the Whooper Highway. In part one, we talked about what they learned following the migration route of the endangered whooping crane. We pick up on that conversation now. Mike, what can people do in their own communities to help support conservation?
I guess, the ecology and economy are based out of the same root word, out of Greek, named oikos. And that's what eco is, oikos, and oikos means home. And so this is our home, and for all your listeners out there, for those of us that were born and raised in the Great Plains, made a life here or have come to it now, this is a place that isn't flyover country. It's beautiful, and it's us. And just like we always have in every generation, we get to decide moving forward how we live with the land, and who we decide to share the planet with. And yet you cannot care if you don't know. And part of our job is to, and yours in this is to share this knowledge, because I think the biggest challenge we maybe have is not necessarily, policies are very much a challenge, and the day-to-day decisions that we all have to make are challenges, but I think it's the indifference. I don't care, I don't care about those birds because they're over there. I don't care about that geography because it's not part of where I live right now. Well, those things aren't true necessarily, but you can't engage with folks unless if you have a story to tell and you figure out some way that it is personal to them. So I've never met anybody that has said that they don't want enough water to be able to live their lives, or that they don't believe in good soil health and don't love a beautiful sunset or flowers in a field or butterflies or birds flying in the sky. So there's all of that we have to get to too. And that's just a basic appreciation. And in an increasingly urban world where we're disconnected with the land, we're not all coming off of a farm or a ranch anymore, but maybe a few generations removed. I think that's one of the greatest challenges of all, and one of the reasons that Andy and I took this trip, and one of the reasons I think that journalism and podcasts and small town newspapers and big television programs and all that are trying to open doors for folks and let them in. Though this isn't a polemic sort of a deal. We're all one community here in the heart of the continent. And one of the important things that we found, Andy and I too, is that we're full of decent people. We never met a stinker for 49 days. People were kind, they were respectful. A few of them thought maybe we were absolutely nuts, but then they'd have us in for dinner, and that's the kind of folks that we are here. And that's the great thing about birds that migrate, cranes and such, is they tie us all together in this community, regardless of whether or not we live in North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, or Nebraska or Oklahoma. We're all bound together in that way. So so that's one.
Talking about the ride itself and some of the things you saw over those 2,500 miles, let's talk about the few hundred miles that were here in North Dakota. Anything stand out to you, or anything that you found interesting?
For me, I just felt really good to be in the prairie potholes again, in the Missouri Coteau, especially southeast of Bismarck, and these just beautiful, ranching landscapes. Were just, it's like we were rolling through a painting of just these heaving hills and rock-strewn hillsides with wildflowers and birds calling and cattle grazing and there was just so much life. It was just so beautiful, and it had been a long time since I had been back in that country, and I'll never forget those days as long as I live. Andy?
Yeah, same. I mean, the Missouri Coteau region was in the best ecological condition of anywhere we went. in North Dakota, right? Southeast of Bismarck, kind of southern Missouri bluffs. You know, just across the South Dakota border, it was actually pretty hard to find some big expanses of grassland. And then again in Northwest North Dakota, outside of conserved areas. But the community of conservationists in North Dakota are incredibly motivated. We had an event in Bismarck on a rainy day, not good weather, and the number of people who came out and were excited, we filled this area, this picnic area, and I was super surprised. And people in North Dakota are very passionate about their grassland and wetland conservation, and that was really meaningful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people anchored in doing their best to save what they can and improve what they can in North Dakota. Yeah, it was tough though. It took till, we got up to the kind of Noonan, Crosby, Losswood area to get into some really nice big expanses of wetland and prairie again. I kind of, as we rounded around Lake Sakakawea and then headed north, I was expecting to see more things in relatively good condition, but there's been a lot of recent habitat conversion there, which was tough morally, emotionally for me, because there's a lot of birds I was looking for, a lot of wetlands and plants I was looking for. We were collecting plant and bird data the whole time. Had a couple hundred species of birds, over 400 species of vascular plants just on our morning surveys. And there was things I thought I was going to see in Northwest North Dakota I didn't, that I had to wait a while to see into Saskatchewan because of the rate of habitat loss. But those hills southeast of Bismarck, I mean, those were some of the most diverse bird surveys on the trip. They were quite outstanding, and the plants were good too. And that's so there's some real gems in North Dakota, but it does make you realize that the gems that are left are what is left, and if they can be conserved intentionally, they should be. And some great folks like the Meadowlark Initiative, and obviously Ducks Unlimited, and the North Dakota Grassland Coalition and others. There's a lot of people working to do that, and supporting them when you ask what you can do is a huge action. Is to support these local nonprofit organizations working on landscape conservation in your backyard. Of course, support ICF as well, but we're a global organization, and the people who know all those ranchers and are working with them on programs like the Meadowlark Initiative, that's a really important thing that you can do to forward conservation in your backyard, and get involved and volunteer too, because they're probably doing volunteers on some invasive tree, treatment,
Yep.
Exercise, cutting cedars or whatever.
Try not to interject myself personally too much in this, but I have to tell you, I'm really involved in native plants and prairie conservation and reprairing areas. And so I'm curious about what part or what role native plants and restoring a lot of native plants in this area could do to help with whooping cranes and other wildlife.
Um,
That's you, Andy.
Oh, well, I'll take it. You know, it was tough. I mean, honestly, you're doing good work there, interjecting yourself, because the best grasslands left we saw were actually in Nebraska and Kansas, whether it was the Flint Hills in Kansas or the Sand Hills in Nebraska. Brome, north of Nebraska, smooth brome became the dominant grass the rest of the trip, which was really hard for me, as I'm kind of half birds, half plants. My thing is actually studying wildlife's relationship to the habitat. So I've always been half and half. Some people say I'm a bird person, I'm a plant person. I'm both. I'm half and half. And you know, it's hard for those birds to navigate, areas with dominant exotic grasses. Now they can live there and they can breed there, but what happens is, the clumping structure and everything else is different, and it makes like chick survival rates maybe slightly different. And over time, it's not advantageous. So anything you're doing to put native grass or restoring native grassland is huge. Luckily in North Dakota, the forb community was significantly more intact, than the grass community. And you'd still see good grasses, you'd still see your prairie June grass, and we'd see some really nice native grasses too, but there wasn't a lot of places that they were dominant, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I mean, most of the dominant ones, if it wasn't brome, it was probably crested wheatgrass or something else. It was hard to find an area with dominated by native warm season grasses. So everything you're doing to continue to forward that as a native plant society is huge. Creative restoration, creative management against brome. A lot of people have done a lot of really good grazing experiments about grazing early and hitting it really hard before it seeds out. Doing that year in and year out, you can actually make a dent. We met a rancher in South Dakota doing just that, Jim Fallstick, and he had made a dent, and he had the most chestnut collared longspurs on the whole trip. So there's your connection of grasses and habitat.
So as we wrap up, what would you hope that people listening to this or people who read Michael's article in our service, what would you hope is the message they would take from all of this? That's a big question, I know.
It's a big question because in a way we're still processing this.
Yeah.
There's the immediate reactions that you have after getting done with the trip, but then it's all the stuff about thinking about it. And I think the further we get from it, the more clear-eyed maybe we'll have about it. But for me as a storyteller, it is really about understanding that we're all connected, and all the straight lines that we've drawn on a map that are political boundaries, whether or not they're between our counties or between our states or between our countries. Most all the wild ones that we share the planet with don't care one lick about those boundaries. And so it's I see us all as one big community here in the Great Plains, and I hope that folks are really proud of the lingering wild that is left here, and then understand that there is a responsibility that we have if in the future we want to share the planet with these animals that stretch from the littlest of the butterflies to the largest of the birds in North America. We've got this great river in the sky, and these great wetlands and grasslands that are still here. And if we can find something that relates to them in our personal lives that goes beyond purely economic decisions, then I think we'll be leaving something for our next generations that is maybe beyond the reach of the words here. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to quote Mike a couple of times and say, it's really about that habitat loss is like those receding glaciers. They're very slow. It's a slow process, and like the frog in boiling water, right? It doesn't know it's heating up, right? We don't know. I don't think the general public is aware the degree to which we've had habitat loss in the Central Flyway, and we're at a point where we have to have discussions and make intentional decisions about what we leave behind for native plants, for wildlife, but for our future generations who want to come and appreciate it, and it makes a richer life. I mean, what wild places add to our human experience, and like Mike said, these borders and things don't matter. We're all in this together. This flyway, if Oklahoma was to lose all of its grass and a wetland, and Kansas was to lose all its wetland and grassland, it wouldn't matter what condition North Dakota is in to some degree. So a lot of these things would just fail to function. So we all are in this together, and cultures that lived on the land for millennia know this kind of stuff. But in a land of immigrants, in some ways we're consistently rediscovering that. That we these patterns matter at scale, and the only way to tell a story at scale is to bite off more than you can chew and try and do it. And I think that's what we tried to do. And it is a story of scale and a story of community and nature at scale. And I hope we conveyed that.
That was Andrew Caven of the International Crane Foundation, along with conservation photographer Mike Forsberg. You can read more about their journey on our website at newscoopnd.org. For the North Dakota News Cooperative, I'm Sabrina Halverson. This has been The Backstory.